introduce Bob. Now, Bob is your client. We all have a Bob. Some of us actually serve a literal Bob, but it might be Stacy, it might be Sue, it might be Will, it might be Steve. But Bob is the kind of client that when you think about your client, that's the first person that comes to mind for you. Now, the problem with Bob is he's not just any client, he's your ideal average client. When I ask lawyers what their ideal client is, they oftentimes come up with someone who doesn't exist. Millions of dollars in legal spend and absolutely no needs at all other than to keep writing checks every month. So Bob actually occupies the intersection of a handful of places, including the kinds of things that you want to do and need to do. But the problem with Bob, like most of our clients, he doesn't care about results most of the time. What do I mean by that? If you think about it from a lawyer standpoint, when you're a lawyer, you get results for your clients every day. Over and over and over again, as a results-focused lawyer, you're delivering to your clients amazing results. But Bob gets one result, and it might be 2 or 3 or 4 years after he retains you. So one of the things that I want to talk about is not just focusing on results, but focusing on Bob's quality of the experience. How it feels to Bob to be your client, to be your customer. And here's one thing that I think we all forget. Bob's satisfaction in real terms is probably unmeasurable. First of all, most lawyers do this. How did we do after we've given you the result? They rarely ask on a regular basis, how are we doing? And if you ask Bob on a Monday, your result is far worse than when you ask him on a Friday, even for the same kind of work that you do. I don't really have much to say about this other than lawyers really get it wrong. When we think what clients want, we tend to focus on the result over and over again, and even when we know where that overlap is, lawyers are generally fairly terrible at delivering it. So I'm going to ask this question. What would your business look like if Bob designed it? Now, I know that we're all going to say Bob wants everything for free, and that might be true. But instead of letting Bob, giving him a carte blanche to actually redesign our business, I want to give you a tool that will help us understand Bob's needs. But I want to start with an example. Who was on an airplane today? Who loves being on an airplane? Oddly enough, no hands ever stay up when I ask that question. I want you to think about every step in your airport experience, from buying the ticket all the way into grabbing your bag and walking out of the airport. Now, it's one thing to say, how do we improve that? But what I want to ask you specifically is look at one piece of the airport experience, checking in. You carry the bag, you know you've got to check it. You see a long line of people in front of you saying, I'm on the wrong airline, I've got 50 bags, it's 41 pounds, why do I have to pay extra money? And when you're in line, when you're waiting in that queue, ask yourself, what do I want in that moment? I want that line to move faster. Faster. That is ultimately the key. The thing that you value most at that particular point in time isn't cheaper, isn't cooler, isn't more interesting, it's faster. And so what that does is it gives you, once you identify that particular value, almost a mission statement against which you can compare every single thing in that experience. Now, I know that as airline CEO might say, how does that make it faster? We all know he says, how can we squeeze $20 more out of that particular passenger? But once you identify that value, now let's talk about what you do with it. So identify each stage of Bob's service experience. For each of us who do different things, that service experience might be different. And there might be 5 steps, there might be 30 steps in that particular experience. But once you pick one, now list ways Bob could have a positive and negative experience at each particular stage. We've all been in a waiting room. What's a positive experience? Well, truthfully, one is I'm not in the waiting room anymore. But a negative one are things like I can see the files all over the floor. I can hear the secretary talking about confidential stuff with other clients. I can feel marginalized. And when you're in Bob's place, think about the kinds of things that Bob is wondering. What does he see? What does he hear? And most importantly, what does he tell others? The moment you're able to sit yourself in Bob's shoes and say, this is what Bob feels or thinks or cares about in this particular experience, you're on your way. And pay very close attention to the things that drive Bob freaking crazy. If nothing else, you should resolve at some point in your career to annoy your clients less. We've all had this particular conversation with Bob. It's always about other lawyers. So now, once you find that experience, what does Bob value most? Just like we cared about that line moving faster, at each point of the experience, Bob wants something. He wants to be more productive in the waiting room. He wants to be more responsive when he calls his lawyer. And when he gets his monthly bill, he wants it to be more predictable. The moment you have that value at each stage, now brainstorm ways to deliver on that value and divide them into these three categories. What's easy to do, what's hard to do, and what's expensive to do. Now, this doesn't mean give up on the others, but if you put them in a huge list, you have no place to start. Once you know what those things are, pick a couple. And it's very important for you to reach out to your staff in these conversations because, truthfully, they know what annoys Bob more than you do because he's the one calling them complaining. But once you know, here's two easy ones, here's hard ones, here's an expensive one, go to Bob. Go to your best clients, your ideal average clients, and say, here's what we're trying to do for you. And one of the reasons why you break this down by every piece of the experience is you can have a measurement. Going back to the airline example, I know how long the lines are now. And we can, minute by minute, measure our improvement as a company, as an organization. And the moment that you have an opportunity to know what Bob values at each experience, to know what he cares about and deliver upon it, you have the capacity, the capability to serve all of your Bobs better, and your business will grow. So thank you very much. I've got a couple thank yous to close the night, but thank you again to all of our speakers.